Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's daily recap on this Friday, April 17th. I'm Evan Lazarus, and I want to follow up on my comments from earlier this morning in the morning call, and I talked about a range-bound market. And I just, with today's price action gapping down, we're still firmly embedded within this short-term range that is then embedded, again, just following up on earlier comments as we go out to a weekly in this intermediate term range, which is embedded then, and as I go out just a little bit further, here's a monthly chart, which is embedded, again, in my opinion, within some sort of larger ascending wedge type of chart pattern, rising triangle, whatever you want to call it. These patterns are notorious, and the reason I highlight the short-term, the intermediate term, and the overall is that we have to take our cues from the wide lens, and then filter it down to the short term. And what I want to show here is not necessarily this bigger picture, which again is a rather large potential pattern, but really the bottom trend line. The bottom trend line to me that you see here really signals potential of something changing. And if and when this market does break that area, and again, trend lines are not an exact science, they're a little more subjective, then convincingly something, in my opinion, with this market has changed. I do think we are setting up for that, but moreover, the market, the interesting thing about this pattern, regardless of, the fact that it kind of spells out a potential reversal, is that in this general area, and all I'm doing is connecting highs and lows, you can see price constricting. This pattern is indicative that at the top, price constricts. The lower end of the range and the higher end of the range are very, very different than what you saw down here in terms of just, movement. It's like a coiled spring, and this market is coiling and coiling and coiling in this area. Now, it's defined ultimately by this. I think if we look at it on a horizontal level, it's really been a very, very tight trading range for several months. And as this trading range has, kind of been popping back and forth, up and down, and I'll go back to, more of a daily time frame, you can see that here. Going back into, November, you basically have something, along these lines. And since March, we've been contained in the upper half of, let's say, the broader pattern. Many day traders, swing traders, shorter term players are going to key off of this area up here, because a break of this range would spell that we are going to potentially, on the downside, test back into the January, December lows, and on the upside, potentially see into new all-time highs. We've seen lots of rejection here. We've seen rejection back here in mid-December. We saw rejection here in February, and then, in the shorter term, here and most recently here. So the market has proved that there is a formidable level of resistance up here. Sideways channels are challenging to trade because at highs, you want to believe that we're going to break out and go topside. And at lows, it's very easy to get consumed by, well, we're going to break down. So buying and selling at highs or lows is challenging, and it's very hard, just human nature, to get their hands around, being a seller at the top and being a buyer at the lower end, because it's just, you're looking for follow through. Now, so what does today mean? Well, today doesn't really mean that much. Obviously, you saw a big gap down followed by selling, and late in the day, the market kind of poked its head back, to the upside. I'll zoom in just a little bit just to kind of give you a little clarity. As short term, we tested the support levels down here. This was last week's range, last week's low, I believe. We found a little bit of buyer step in there. This looks like a little bit of an island top. An island is, and I'll zoom into even a smaller time frame. Here's a 30-minute chart. You can see that an island is basically a body of candlesticks. This is a 30-minute chart where you gap up right here into that area, and then it kind of creates this little island, and then it gaps down out of that area. So it's like think of it like a body of land surrounded by water. They call it, from a technical standpoint, it's got a funny little name of an island. And you see these at tops and bottoms. These are island reversals, and they can change a shift in sentiment and a shift in direction. So that's basically, what this looks like to me. And on this gap down today, that caused, that dramatic shift here where you saw price, sell off pretty aggressively throughout the course of the day. And then, going into the last hour, hour plus, we saw a little bit of a snapback there as we did test into these prior lows down here. So from a short-term trader's perspective, now what happens come Monday? Well, we could certainly, snap back and attempt to fill this gap. I suspect, we may, test into today's highs. Various things can happen. There's no way for anybody to say this is exactly what will happen. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of chatter about Greece and various other, geopolitical headlines that'll, always garner some interest. But we got to stay focused on price and the clues that price presents us. From an individual stock vantage point, today you saw obviously a lot of selling as the market, ducked down, most notably in tech and financials. You saw some sellers step in. American Express kind of leading the charge here with earnings on this gap down, and basically we saw, I'm showing you intraday charts here, one strong move at the open, and then it kind of bounced around for a little while. But American Express, a very weak-looking stock on multiple time frames, monthly, daily. Let me show you a weekly. Here's a weekly. Got a strong trend starting to develop in place. All these on the weekly, all these bounces into the 8 period have basically been sold, and it continues to flirt with, looking like it wants to head to that lower 70 area. Which were, I'd say more significant support somewhere down in this, low 70s. That looks like it's ultimately going to head that way. On the flip side of that, Netflix, as I said this morning, Netflix breaking out and not really giving much care to the market itself, as it did see above yesterday's high. We did see buyers step in and take this one to new highs again today. So these stocks have their own personality, their own agenda for that matter, and not everything is going to be reflective of what the market itself does. Biotech, IBB, turning down a little bit today. Selling was, to me, rather controlled and contained. Still has a very bearish-looking potential scenario here against, I would call this Wednesday, Thursday highs. I would keep an eye on that level and how price reacts up here. And as the market kind of popped late in the day, we saw, the stock, or this ETF, snap back later in the last, hour and a half of the day. Here's the 30-minute chart of IBB. So biotech, we saw fast money at the open, sellers stepping right in, and then it was pretty much a sideways session up until the last hour and change. So the market kind of doing its thing here, and it continues to fool most. As I sit and watch the market throughout the course of the day, I have CNBC on in the background, and I hear every opinion from this way to that way to up to down to sideways, and it's a value investors market, it's a growth market, it's a traders market, it's a bull market, we're on the verge of a massive sell-off. So there's clearly lots of opinions out there, and the one that I think everybody needs to continue to focus on is that of price. Let price be the arbiter or dictate, how we're supposed to react, rather than headlines and news-driven events. Let price, like I said, tell us what it wants to do, when it wants to do it. At this point, it's hard to pick a side. The side of the coin you need to be on is, short, active, cash flow oriented type trades. In my opinion, it's hard to step in and just say I'm gonna be a bull or I'm gonna be a bear. You're gonna get days where we're gonna sell off. Clearly, the volume today was pretty substantial on this move down. And although you were going to be inundated with headlines about the Eurozone and Greece and various earnings and sectors, Again, try to stay, laser focused on, what price is telling you should do rather than what you think you should do based on a headline. As always, I hope it was a good week trading, and I will talk to you next week. Enjoy your weekend.